Namaskara and welcome to BIC Talks, a podcast brought to you by Bangalore International Centre, where we present conversations that move, inform, and encourage discourse.
If you look at the Indian subcontinent, of course, from whatever evidences I have been seeing, I believe only in my archaeozoological evidences. Horse is very doubtful in the Indus Valley civilization, though people have identified some remains, but there is confusion. Some say that it may have belonged to the wild, say the wild ass, and not definitely the actual domestic horse. But then right from say 1500 BC onwards, we are getting horse at some of these Iron Age sites in northern India associated with the painted greyware cultures, and that is when the horse really comes in.
You just heard Dr. Aarti Deshpande Mukherjee speaking about domestication of animals in India. Dr. Deshpande Mukherjee is Assistant Professor, Archaeozoology at the Deccan College Postgraduate and Research Institute, Pune. The Indians is a collection of essays by some of South Asia's foremost historians and scholars that maps the origins, evolution, and present-day reality of India's civilization and people. The collection covers a period of some 12,000 years, from the last ice age to the 21st century. The book is divided into 7 sections: the evolution of humans and their life conditions, foundations, emergence, and the decline of civilization, the language mix and philosophies in ancient India, cultures, subnationalities and region, colonialism, towards federalism, social and political movements, and India since independence. This BIC Talks mini-series, Histories of a Civilization, glimpses into the collection, presenting readings from selected essays interspersed with conversations with the scholar who wrote them, providing a sampling of the various topical discourses that cover the epochs of the subcontinent, and hopes to encourage our listeners to take a deep dive into what makes the Indians.
Professor Aarti, can you please tell our listeners why and how you got interested in the subject of history and archaeology? What led you to to your very fascinating research in these fields?
I had done my BSc in geology, and I wanted to pursue it further at Fergusson College in Pune. But then I was slowly getting a little bit actually bored with just studying hard rocks. And I was interested in knowing about human evolution and how far back we go back in antiquity, especially human cultures, archaeology. And this had also to do, in those days, we only had National Geographics to read and get our information from, and from some of the movies which we used to watch. Unlike in today's times, people have Discovery channels and National Geographic channels to get motivated. But in those days, this was what really motivated me. And then I came to Deccan College and I did my master's in archaeology, and somewhere I left geology and I took to zoology because I was always been interested in animals. And that is why I started researching on this, because I really felt it very exciting. And not much work was being done in India except from my then guru, Professor P.K. Thomas. So this was a subject which was not that broadly being pursued by many Indian scholars, and that is why I felt that somewhere one should try to understand that animals have been important in our past, especially in Indian scenario, and try to learn various aspects related to the utilization, right from first animals which came into the Indian subcontinent, which then became extinct. And then later on, the hunter-gatherers, how they were exploiting these animals, and followed by when animals get domesticated and what sort of interactions they have with communities following that.
So, yes, one question that I have is, have humans domesticated various other species, bugs, birds, fish, animals, only for getting things from them as food, or labor, or has there also been any element of love, affection, curiosity for other species? What is your observation as an archaeologist and historian?
If you see over the thousands of years, humans' association with animals, I mean, previously, say during 10,000 years ago or 40, 50,000 years ago, they were also occupying the same landscape as these hunter gatherers. And initially, there was a selfish need for exploiting them as food because they were easily available and some could be easily hunted also. But slowly, maybe with time, humans started appreciating some of the wildlife which is quite beautiful to look at, which is very interesting, which is something which becomes unique to a particular region. And that is why they started, and maybe they were not able to access them so easily, so they formed, they started painting them, collecting some of these very exotic birds. Their feathers were being used, or some of the birds like your ostrich, they started using their eggshells. So through time, we find that the associations have been going on, interactions were there, and in a way, humans to a certain extent have been sort of selfish and greedy also, because they were basically trying to exploit as much as they could from their landscape, and animals were one of them. So some of the animals which could be easily hunted, domesticated, they came under their purview, but some of them could not be, and they sort of remained in the marginal, their interaction spheres.
Can we say that a lot of political history and history of wars of humans have been very deeply impacted by the animals that humans domesticated, different animals humans domesticated from time to time, era to era. I mean, whether it's elephants, camels, or horses, or whatever. I mean, they have they have been an essential element in shaping the history of humans. Would you say that?
To a certain extent, there have been political differences have been there in various parts of the world from since the prehistoric times, and animals somewhere might have been also at the center of such kind of skirmishes which were happening, maybe as to have their, to own them, to procure them. Like, we are seeing in the medieval times, there used to be a lot of cattle raids happening, say in parts of Karnataka, in Tamil Nadu also, to a certain extent, and I think in Maharashtra too, where you have hero stones reporting them, inscriptions reporting them. So some of these animals became like prized, valuable possessions, and people went out of their way to sort of exploit them and then go to wars also, just to capture these animals and then bring them back to their settlements. Certain resources, like, we see this purple dye which the Romans used to use for dyeing their clothes. So maybe these Romans, their one intent of expanding their civilization also might have been one of these reasons, to gain some of these resources which were not so easily available in their own domains. So animals may have triggered off wars. I cannot think of any such particular animals, but they have been used in wars. We see them being used as, for carrying people, and like elephants and camels, very commonly use horses. And especially during, again, the late historic period onwards, we start seeing the very important horse trade, which was being carried out right from West Asia right up till our India, and maybe even further going down into South Asia, Southeast Asia. So these horse trade also must have involved a lot of political powers, being involved, where they were controlling it and seeing that, good quality horses were brought in. So there are some animals like this which would have been involved in such kind of trade.
ownership of cows became a big kind of element in formation of state at some stage in history. But thank you for throwing light on this. My colleague, Professor Ravi Korishettar, has told me that this domestication of animals goes way back, even prior to the Holocene, because he was describing cave paintings with some animal pictures and so on. He will speak to you.
Yeah, Arti,
Yes, sir.
we have clear evidence of cattle becoming wealth since the Neolithic times. Perhaps these battles of Mahabharata were associated with capturing cattle herds.
I'm not so sure about in northern India because we do get cattle bones at almost all our sites, right from the Neolithic period onwards. But in this particular historic period associated with some of these Mahabharata sites and all, we do have animal remains where cattle are also there, but no such concrete evidence to say that they might be fought over, like what we are now getting from, say, Tamil Nadu or Karnataka, where there are proper inscriptions talking about these raids involving cattle.
In the Neolithic, we have this Ashmont tradition
Yes.
associated with cattle keeping economy. And there was that symbiotic relationship between humans and some of these herd animals which were herded by these early agropastoral communities. So, sheep, goat, and then cattle were the animals which were living in symbiosis with these early agropastoral communities. Prior to that, what we see is Upper Paleolithic evidence of dog becoming hunting expeditions and so on. Yeah, all dog burials are all in the Neolithic after it gets a full-fledged domesticated animal. But in the rock paintings, normally what we have seen is in prehistoric context, most of the animals were hunted animals. You see, if these are narratives, they deal mostly with hunting expeditions. But otherwise, there is no direct evidence of a domesticated form of animal, because even in the Neolithic context in southern India, where we have cattle bones coming from a Neolithic context, what we have seen is already it was fully domesticated morphology. And we are yet to trace that phase where the transition from wild to domestication, uh, has not been seen in the archaeological record. And then they are suspecting three different centers of cattle domestication in India. It was native to Balochistan, native to central India, and then somewhere in southern India, there was another wild progenitor of all the domesticated cattle in the Neolithic. To what extent do you agree with this particular inference drawn on the basis of archaeofaunal evidence of cattle, especially?
So yes, I do agree with these evidences. First evidence we always relate to is the Mehergarh evidence, because that is the oldest Neolithic site we have going to the 7th millennium, and we are already finding presence of domestic cattle in these levels at Mehergarh. So it was very much there, and prior to it, it is a little bit foggy, or information is not there because we don't have any archaeozoological remains going even earlier to that. And coming to northern India, yes, now our results from Birana definitely show that Birana was also in a way contemporary with Mehergarh, and we are getting cattle remains right from the Hakra levels also, and this is domestic cattle. There's a paper which I had published, I think 1 year, 2 years back, in the cattle volume, which has come out. So there we are able to show that already presence of domestic cattle is recorded there. And of course, Meadow and Patel also talk about, one area of likely domestication happening is North Gujarat, where they were finding, presence of both your wild cattle as well as the domestic cattle. Now, wild cattle today is not there in India. It is extinct. So to have presence of both these animals together would suggest that there was some interactions, and that's how some domestication must have appeared. And these sites are, of course, the ones in North Gujarat, they are dated to the 4th millennium, but we already have sites in northern India and say Mehergarh, which are much even earlier. And of course, in the Neolithic in southern India is a little later, when cattle already appear in their very fully domesticated forms. So these areas which they are talking about definitely would are the areas for, and they talk about multiple areas of domestication of cattle. So somewhere in this whole northern India, northwestern part of the subcontinent, we would be able to get, and maybe with more sites which are giving much more earlier dates, we would be able to really come up with some actual good reconstruction of this evolutionary history of especially our bos indicus, that is the humped cattle.
What you say is very fascinating, Professor. And one learning for me to take home from what you say is that the symbiotic relationship between other species and humans has been the real history of life, and only human-centric history is not complete history of humans. I just wanted to ask you one small question. As a linguist, I'm asking this. I'm told that the horse played a very big role in spread of languages in particularly the third millennium, second millennium before Christ. Is that really so?
If you look at the Indian subcontinent, of course, from whatever evidences I have been seeing, I believe only in my archaeozoological evidences. Horse is very doubtful in the Indus Valley civilization, though people have identified some remains, but there is confusion. Some say that it may have belonged to the wild, say the wild ass, and not definitely the actual domestic horse. But then, right from say 1500 BC onwards, we are getting horse at some of these Iron Age sites in northern India associated with the painted graveware cultures, and that is when the horse really comes in. And I'm sure with the coming of the horse, things must have really speeded up movement of people migrating also, because in the historic period we see the horses are coming in, and by the medieval period they're becoming such a common commodity through trade and things like that. So again, dispersal of some of your languages and all would have been brought around with people coming with their horses. So this is what my inference is about the horse, and how it must have been. Definitely, it is an animal which is coming maybe all the way from parts of Arabia, West Asia, and these were all trading with the Indian subcontinent in this last 2000 years. So with them, they must have been bringing a lot of other cultural aspects along with languages and
Yeah,
things
what
like
you
that.
describe makes me think of the spread of colonialism and the rise of automobile. Instead of animals, we're domesticating cars now, all of us. Instead of horses, we cars now. Thank you for contributing to this wonderful book on histories of a civilization, and your chapter is of a very seminal importance in that book. People have already read and appreciated. They're talking about it. If you would like to say anything more about your chapter, your essay in the book, please do so.
Sir, firstly, I would really like to thank you, Professor Corisetter, and the other editor of this volume for, inviting me to write on this particular topic, because we do write, research articles and things like that, but to write it for a common person, you have to really have to approach it in a very different way. And for me also, it was a good learning experience bringing all this data together and writing. And I'm very happy that I hope I have done justice to it, because actually the time was quite short. Maybe I could have done a better job of it. That could come through the review of the article by maybe some of the learned scholars. But yes, it was very interesting to write for your book, and I'm happy that it is formed one of the plays a big important role in this book also. And yes, there is a lot more to think about animal domestication and how animals have been used in the Indian subcontinent. Not, we just see them simply as food and maybe used as raw material and things like that, but it's much more deeper down also. There are so many different kinds of interactions which need to be explored. And here we need to bring in even a lot of genetics, which unfortunately we are not using that much for understanding the evolution of some of these animals, because even things like cattle or the buffalo, uh, or even the dogs also, that when they start appearing in the Indian subcontinent, where are they coming from? Where are these associations being communicated from? So this would also give a good probably from a stepping stone for looking into more details of all these animals, including the horse also. Unfortunately, as archaeozoologists, we have sort of kept it aside. We have not really worked, because I believe in that if we could get enough samples, if we could have enough bones of this particular animal, then we can really come up with some substantial, evidence to talk about. So that is why, from my side, the horse I have kept it aside. But yes, maybe some later scholars also should think about it. And yeah, there's lots more to do with these animals in the Indian subcontinent. Yes.
Thank you so much. We all look forward. In fact, your essay, I was told by some friends, makes them curious about your next work, and we all look forward to some larger book for common readers, where you give a good account of India in terms of bees and the butterflies and the horses and the cows and the dogs and so on, because I think they have made us who we are today. We hardly any time realize their importance in shaping our lives and making us who we are. You have opened up a very fascinating area of work. In Karnataka, the listeners of this episode will certainly think of the new war emerging between elephants and humans. There's a big war beginning between elephants and humans, and we need persons like you to provide some peacemaking formulas in that. Thank you so much.
Domestication of animals in India. Since prehistoric times, animals have shared varied kind of relationships with humans, serving as a food resource for obtaining secondary products such as raw material. They have served as predators, parasites, and companions, and as a transport. Through time, human association with animals has changed in different ways. The transition from hunting animals and to domesticating some of them reveals the complex relationships shared by humans and animals. In the Indian subcontinent, a wide range of fields such as paleontology, literary studies, inscriptions, numismatics, and archaeozoology provide significant insights into the past human-animal interactions, going as far back as 1 lakh years ago. Among the sources used, the unearthing of skeletal parts of different animals from archaeological sites and their study, referred to as archaeozoology, is the closest one could get to inferring these relationships in the past. One of the earliest encounters with animals is evident from the recovery of animal fossils from the Pleistocene period. This is the geological epoch that lasted from about 2 crores 5 lakh 80,000 years to nearly 11,700 years ago, spanning the Earth's most recent period of repeated glaciations and when humans first appeared. It is from this period that animal fossils have been discovered at Paleolithic sites in Hunsgi and Baijbal valleys, Athrimpakam in Tamil Nadu, Chirki on river Pravara, Morgaon and Bori in Maharashtra, Kalpi in Uttar Pradesh, etc. A wide range of animal fossils such as Bos pneumaticus, Equus pneumaticus, Elephas hysodricus, Hexaprotodon species are reported from peninsular India along the banks of the river Narmada, Godavari, Ghod, Krishna and Manjra. Fossil occurrences have also been reported from the Shivalik hills in the Sub Himalayas and from parts of eastern India. Towards the end of the Pleistocene, however, some animals like Hexaprotodon, that is hippopotamus, equid species horse, and Bos pneumaticus wild cattle disappeared from the faunal record and have no extant species surviving them today in India. So far, there is no convincing evidence to show that these now extinct animals have been exploited by humans, but their existence has helped in paleo-environmental reconstruction, suggesting the existence of a wet human landscape with grass cover wherein animals like the hippo, elephant, rhino, buffalo could thrive.
Some evidence for the early human-animal interactions is available from the Middle and Upper Paleolithic cultures at Jwalapuram and Bilasurgam caves in Andhra Pradesh, Kattuatti in Rajasthan, and Patni in Maharashtra. Here, among other terrestrial mammals that were hunted, such as the black buck, gazelle, and wild boar, a common use of ostrich is strongly evident in the form of eggshell beads. This particular bird was found to be used during the early Holocene period, but following that it became extinct in the subcontinent. One probable factor being overexploitation. That smaller animal resources were also used as food is seen from the shells of freshwater and terrestrial mollusks at some of the Karnool cave sites. Depiction of animals in rock shelters at Bhimbetka in Madhya Pradesh has revealed the faunal diversity and aspects of hunting in the late Quaternary period from central India. In general, aspects of animal-based subsistence during the Paleolithic times is difficult to reconstruct due to the limited nature of the archaeozoological remains from the Pleistocene period.
Following the end of the Pleistocene period, a more substantial amount of evidence for the transition from hunting or gathering or trapping of animals to herding and stock rearing of domestic animals is documented in the last 10,000 years during the Holocene. During early Holocene, South Asia was inhabited by the Mesolithic cultures characterized by microlithic tool assemblages, human burials, and rock art. The Mesolithic stone industries were an adaptation to the early Holocene environment between the Upper Paleolithic and the introduction of agriculture. In India, many Mesolithic sites are reported from Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, and the Indo Plains. The Mesolithic culture spanned over a long period, with its beginnings in the early part of the Holocene and then continuing as late as the Indus Valley civilization. Faunal data recovered largely shows a subsistence economy based on hunting and fishing. At sites such as Neemkhedi, Bagor, Tilwara, Langhnaj, Mahadaha, Damdama, Loteshwar, Datrana, Santhali, etc., wild cattle, wild caprines, antelopes, and rhinoceros are reported. At some later period sites like Langhnaj, the presence of domestic cattle and goats along with the rhino is also recorded. In the Ganga plains, from the Mesolithic period onwards, animal bones post-meat extraction were commonly used to make tools like bone points, awls, a tradition which continued into the later periods such as the Neolithic or Chalcolithic, painted grey ware, and historic.
Due to the surface nature of many Mesolithic remains, limited radiocarbon dates, and highly fragmented animal bones, it has been difficult to learn about the transition from hunting, gathering, to early domestication of animals like sheep, goat, and cattle. The advent of Neolithic cultures around 8000 to 7000 BCE saw the introductions of pottery, beginnings of agriculture, and animal domestication in Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran, and China. In South Asia, Neolithic culture is identified as early as the 7th millennium BCE at Mehrgarh in Pakistan. Here, the beginnings of settled life, agriculture, use of ceramics, and domesticated animals has been documented. In its early levels, during the aceramic phase, exploitation of wild animals is recorded, but in the succeeding phase, ceramics and the presence of domestic cattle, sheep, and goats is seen. From the presence of domestic cattle, such as the humped variety referred to as zebu at Mehrgarh, and its more recent identification in the Hakra ware period at the Harappan settlement of Bhirranna in Haryana, It is established that domestic cattle were used in northwest South Asia by the 7th millennium BCE. Following which, by the 3rd millennium BCE, cattle pastoralism was quite common in the Indus Valley and adjoining areas.
Neolithic settlements have been found in the northwest, south, northeast, and eastern parts of India, datable between 3000 BCE to 1000 BCE. Some important Neolithic sites are Burzahom in Kashmir, Gufkral in Kashmir, Chirand in Bihar, Lahura Deva in Uttar Pradesh, and Utnur in Andhra Pradesh. In period 2 at Burzahom in Kashmir, a significant discovery is of humans buried along with wild animals like deer, ibex, wolf, and domesticated animals like cattle, buffalo, dog, sheep, and goat. Discovery of dog skeletons along with human burial indicates the relationship of dogs with humans as pets, companions, etc. Another important Neolithic site is Lahura Deva in Sant Kabir Nagar district of Uttar Pradesh, which has provided the earliest evidence for rice domestication in India. In its early period, 1a, no domestic animals like cattle or goats were identified. However, these were introduced during the period 1b, early farming phase. At this site, cattle were killed at a younger age. Shorthorn variety of cattle having a height of 120 to 125 centimeters at withers were used. Since the Ganga Valley sites were in the vicinity of rivers and oxbow lakes, the Neolithic people were able to exploit a variety of aquatic resources such as fish and turtles.
At southern Neolithic sites in Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka like Budihar, Kodekal, Utnur, Piklihal, Halur, and Sanganakallu, it is observed that both cattle and sheep goat pastoralism were commonly practiced. At Halur, the ankylosis of cattle bones probably indicated that it was a result of carrying heavy loads. A characteristic feature of these Neolithic sites is the large-scale accumulation of burnt cattle dung, hence referred to as ash mounds. While factors responsible for their formation remain unclear, the large number of animal bones, the painting of cattle on rocks at Sanganakallu, Hiregudda, and terracotta cattle figurines all indicate the important role of cattle in the economy of southern Neolithic people. More complex human-animal interactions became evident during the Indus Valley Civilization, which flourished between 2600 and 1900 BCE in northwestern parts of the Indian subcontinent. The development of this civilization witnessed expansion of settlements, systematic town planning, social organization, craft specialization, writing, etc. That animals had contributed in various ways is strongly attested from the depiction of animals on seals, pottery, as figurines, and the large quantities of excavated animal remains from many Harappan sites across the Indus Valley Civilization. Due to the numerous faunal studies carried out, a rich archaeozoological record has been retrieved for this civilization as compared to other cultural periods. In the early 20th century, publication of reports on excavated animal remains from Mohenjo-daro and Harappa for the first time helped initiate archaeozoological studies in India. Following this, many more came to be carried out for sites such as Rangpur, Surkotada, Lothal, Nageshwar, Kuntasi, Dholavira, Shikarpur, Kalibangan, Bagasra, Farmana, Kanmer, Bhirana, Kotada Bhadli, and others. These studies have revealed the exploitation of domestic animals such as cattle, buffalo, sheep, goat, pigs, dogs, and chicken. Hunting was also practiced, wherein large bovids such as gaur, wild buffalo, and rhino were hunted along with deer, nilgai, antelopes, wild pigs, and others.
At almost all of the sites, the humped cattle, Bos indicus, is the most predominant. Its frequent depiction on seals, figurines, and pottery attests to its economic importance. Cattle had been used as food and for obtaining secondary products such as milk and dung. The common depiction of bull signified power and strength. Since the presence of the horse remains debatable, the bulls were the most commonly used draft animals for plowing and traction. Recovery of toy bullock cart frames and wheels from Birana and Banavali provides insights into the type of carts used by the Harappans. Insights into the paleoclimatic conditions during the Indus Valley civilization have been obtained from recent studies at Birana, integrating faunal radiocarbon optically stimulated luminescence dates and stable isotope studies on cattle teeth. They have shown that Birana had flourished from the 9 to the 7 kilo annum along the banks of the river Ghagar from the Hakra or pre-Harappan phase during intensified monsoon conditions which declined after 7 kilo annum. Yet Birana continued to survive from the early to mature Harappan period. The exploitation of domestic animals like cattle, sheep, and goat is evident from its earliest cultural periods, that is, the Hakra or pre Harappan phase. Besides cattle, buffaloes were also utilized, but whether the latter was also domesticated in the Indus Valley remains to be established. Till date, the overall faunal evidence shows that the Harappans had exploited a wide range of animals, which they used as food for their secondary products like milk, hide, dung, bone, ivory, and shell, and for their labor as draft animals. A mixed subsistence economy of cattle breeding, sheep and goat herding, hunting, and fishing was practiced. The latter is evident from the depiction of fish on pottery and skeletal elements of both riverine and marine fish. These have been recorded at coastal sites like Kuntasi, Shikarpur, and inland sites of Birana, Dholavira, Lothal, etc. Among the many animals reported, the presence or absence of the domestic horse during the Indus Valley civilization continues to be debated upon. While it shows negligible representation in figurines or on seals and pottery, a few isolated bones are reported from Surkotada, which were identified as those of the domestic horse by the archaeozoologist Sandor Bucconi. However, this identification has been challenged and it is postulated that these instead belong to the wild ass, Equus haemonus. Osteologically, both the domestic horse and wild ass share similarities, hence it is difficult to identify if the skeletal markers are lacking. Till further in-depth investigation of the horse remains is done, using both genetics and archaeozoology, this problem will remain unresolved. Another animal of which little is known is the camel, due to the poor recovery of its skeletal remains, which have been recovered mostly from the late levels at Mohenjo-daro, Kalibangan, and Harappa. These are identified as the remains of the single-humped Arabian camel. The presence of elephants is attested from the depiction on seals, but the limited bones recovered has made it difficult to learn about their role, which might have been for obtaining ivory and as draft animals. All these three large animals gained considerable economic importance in the historic and medieval periods. In the Indus Valley civilization, certain animals such as cattle, buffalo, rhino were economically important, but in addition to this, they also had some socio-religious significance attached to them, as well as observed from their depiction on seals and as figurines. Significant development during the Indus Valley and contemporary Chalcolithic cultures was the manufacture of objects made using shell, bone, and ivory. Of significance is the use of marine shells, particularly of the large gastropod Turbinella pyrum, for making objects like bangles and beads. The development of shell working activities during the Indus Valley civilization are found to continue into the later cultural periods, as well as when particularity during the historic period became important, craft industries exhibiting high craftsmanship, as is noted at the site of Vadnagar in Gujarat. The Indus Valley civilization, due to its vast geographical spread and exploitation of wide-ranging animal resources, can be credited for laying the foundation for the development of animal husbandry and a strong animal-based subsistence economy in the Indian subcontinent. Similar modes of animal exploitation are visible in the contemporary Chalcolithic cultures in western and central India. Its continuity is also observed in later cultural periods such as the Iron Age, early historic, and historic periods.
Following the decline of the Indus Valley civilization between 1900 and 1300 BCE, and with the introduction of iron during the Iron Age or megalithic period around 1000 BCE, appreciable evidence for animal exploitation is available from sites associated with painted grey ware culture in northern India and at Iron Age sites in Vidarbha and a few sites in Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, and Tamil Nadu. It is in this period that horse remains have been reported from sites such as Bhagwanpur, Mahurjhari, Raipur, and Pochampad. In Vidarbha region of eastern Maharashtra, faunal evidence from both megalithic burials and habitation sites like Mahurjhari, Raipur, Naikund, and Malli has revealed that Iron Age faunal economy was also based largely on the use of cattle, buffalo, sheep, goats, and pigs. A significant finding is the skeletal parts of a horse with some ornaments in the burials at Mahurjhari and Raipur, suggesting special status given to the animal after its death. With the onset of the Vedic Age and the culmination of the Iron Age or megalithic period, followed by the early historic and historic cultures, large-scale dependence on domestic animals is observed. Cattle in particular were important because their secondary products such as milk and ghee were required in many of the Vedic rituals. They also came to be worshipped and were considered sacred. Animals like the horse, who were required during Vedic sacrifices and for transportation, became common trade commodity by the medieval times in trade. Activities involving animals are highlighted in some of the Buddhist and Jaina texts, ancient literary texts such as the Rig Veda, Kautilya's Arthashastra, Sangam literature, and travel accounts from foreigners. These have provided interesting details on animal husbandry practices, their management, economic importance, etc. during the last 2000 years.
To conclude, in India, archaeozoological evidence from the last 10,000 years and more has revealed the diverse ways in which animals had been utilized during different cultural periods. This has eventually led to the continued dependency on domestic animals, even in modern times, despite technological advancement and also in the near extinction of some wild fauna.
Yeah, I to ask you one last question. Is there a pan-Asia study of human-animal relationship?
So there are a lot of research which is being done, and there are all kinds of experts who which come under this whole. We have a particular body called as the ICAS, International Council of Archaeozoologists, and in that you will find there are people specializing in mammals, birds, fish, reptiles, all the latest scientific techniques. And these people are working in all parts of the world, whether it is Southeast Asia. Unfortunately, in India, we are a very few people, but a lot of people are working in West Asia, where today the wars are going on, and they are really suffering because there's such good data which is coming out from those sites like Israel and Syria and Egypt and these places. So world over, there are really very dedicated scientists, as we call them, archaeozoologists, who are devoting their whole life, to learning about these kind of interactions which have happened in the past through such kind of archaeozoological remains. So it is really taken to various levels, and they regularly have conferences. There are very good publications. And of course, now using genetics also, a lot of more information is coming out for basically animal domestication all over the world. That when did the first dog come, or when did the first chickens come, where did they come from, and such kind of aspects.
I will eagerly be waiting to know from where the chicken came, whether the egg comes first or the chicken comes first. That's the fundamental philosophical question. With that question, we will close this episode.
You have been listening to BIC Talks by Bangalore International Centre. If you like what you heard, do follow us on social media. Keep up with our programming by signing up for our mailer on the website, or leave us a review or rating on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. The crew that makes these podcasts possible is Gaurav Krishna and Ishan Gupta on sound supervision and production, with support from S. Sarunaraj and Raghu Tenkaila. Artwork is designed by Chandni Venkataraman of Crisscross Design Studio. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel on your favorite podcast platform. It can also be accessed on our website, bangaloreinternationalcentre.org. This is Lekha Naidu signing off on behalf of everyone at BIC.